Thus begins the film Oppenheimer, one that many consider to be Christopher Nolan's masterpiece. The film chronicles the life of scientist Robert Oppenheimer, his role leading the Manhattan Project, which developed the atomic bomb for the United States during World War II, and the time when his loyalty to his country was questioned due to his former ties to communist parties. But beyond that, the Oppenheimer film links the scientist to the myth of Prometheus, a story that tells us about progress, the dangers of technology, and how a central character motivated by good intentions went against the rules in order to save humanity without thinking that his actions could have unintended consequences. Christopher Nolan based his film Oppenheimer on the book The American Prometheus, and today we will understand exactly what the relationship between these two characters is. It is true that Oppenheimer is a Promethean character, but it is also true that we can see this analogy in several ways. My name is Go, the Geek Monitor, and this is my video essay about Oppenheimer Prometheus and the perils of technology. Chapter 1. The Prometheus Myth. Long ago, before the creation of man, a group of Greek gods known as the Olympians faced off against another group of divine beings called Titans in a great war that would become known as the Titanomachy, in which the Olympians were victorious. After their defeat, most of the Titans were condemned to spend eternity in Tartarus, but a Titan named Prometheus, whose name derives from the word premeditation, fought on the side of the Olympians and was rewarded by Zeus, who entrusted him with the creation of the human being. However, Zeus soon began to see that Prometheus put the interests of his new creations above those of the gods, so, enraged, he decided to prohibit the use of fire on Earth. That is why Prometheus decided to steal fire from the gods and gave it to humans, who now had a gift that could light them in the dark, protect and guide them on their way. Beyond that, Prometheus gave humans the opportunity to prosper. Unfortunately, Zeus would not stand idly by and condemned Prometheus to live eternally chained to a rock where a vulture would devour his liver every day. This is a brief summary of the myth of Prometheus. It should be clarified that there are different versions and variations, but with this we can talk about the symbolic power of this myth and why it is related to Robert Oppenheimer. The movie Oppenheimer is based on the book The American Prometheus, but this is not the only time that Prometheus has been related to another person, character, or concept. Percy Shelley portrays Prometheus as a romantic, rebellious, and compassionate hero who defies the gods to bring fire to humans. Meanwhile, his wife Mary Shelley, through her book Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus, seems to give us another point of view, one that warns us of the dangers of uncontrolled ambition and the unbridled pursuit of knowledge. So we have two different ways of looking at Prometheus. On the one hand, we can see him as this audacious character who breaks the rules to give humans the gifts and abilities that were formerly the privilege of the gods alone. And on the other, we can see him as this accidental bringer of destruction, someone who tried to bring progress, but who, in doing so, also gave humanity the ability to destroy itself. We can see this represented through the duality of fire, and in this sense, Prometheus brought us fire, Oppenheimer brought us the atomic bomb. And the analogy is very valid. Since ancient times, fire has been synonymous with progress and technology. Since its discovery, it has provided us with light, heat, and improved the way humans live. It drove industrial revolutions, the birth of great cities, and has been the basis for many technological advances. However, it is also true that there is a destructive potential in fire that has caused humans to occupy it again and again as a weapon for their own benefit and ambition. And something similar happened with atomic energy. For 20th century scientists, atomic energy was something similar to fire. It was a discovery, not an invention, something that was already in nature but could now be harnessed. Prometheus stole fire from the gods, and in a very similar way, Robert Oppenheimer and the Manhattan Project figured out how to harness this atomic discovery for military purposes. After the first atomic bomb exploded on July 16, 1945, during the Trinity test, Oppenheimer would say his most famous phrase, with which he seemed to recognize that human beings for the first time in history had in their hands the power to wield biblical destruction. But another very important point in Prometheus and all these Promethean characters is that they are the ones who usher in a new world. They also play a role as creators. Prometheus created humans out of clay, while Christopher Nolan claims that Robert Oppenheimer, for better or worse, was the one who created the world we live in today. I understand why he says it. The world has never been the same since it witnessed the destructive power that the United States unleashed over the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. as the decades that followed saw a confrontation known as the Cold War, where the two great powers of the world after World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union, competed to see who would accumulate the most political and military power. It was a time of astonishing technological feats, but also one in which the world lived in constant fear of nuclear holocaust amidst a mirage of peace that threatened to shatter at any moment. And here the question must be asked, would it have been better if the United States had never developed the atomic bomb? Chapter 2. The Morality Behind the Bomb. Christopher Nolan was recently asked if the world would have been better off if Oppenheimer had never developed the atomic bomb, to which he replied, "The world would be better off without the threat of nuclear weapons." To understand how it was that the scientific community came to the conclusion that they needed to start working on a bomb of this magnitude, it is necessary to understand the historical context. In 1938, scientists Fermi and Szilard achieved nuclear fission in the laboratory for the first time and feared that Hitler would take over their research, so they decided to ask Albert Einstein to write a letter to President Roosevelt. A year later, Einstein writes the letter to the president warning him that the Nazis are developing an atomic bomb, so he suggests that they begin to do the same. This is a point that the film Oppenheimer presents very well. We are told that the scientific community was aware of the destructive power that the existence of such a bomb would mean, knew that the Nazis had the technological capacity to develop it, and decided to start doing the same. In fact, the film also initially presents Oppenheimer as a person truly concerned about the situation that the Jewish population was living on the other side of the world. However, at one point in the war, Hitler's Nazi Germany was defeated, and many scientists, including Szilard himself, no longer saw it as ethical to attack Japan, a country that was on the brink of defeat with such destructive power. 70 people from the scientific community signed a letter to the President of the United States which read as follows. Until recently, we feared that the United States would be attacked by atomic bombs during this war, and that our only defense lay in a counterattack by the same means. Today, with the defeat of Germany, this danger has passed. The development of atomic power will give nations new means of destruction. The atomic bombs in our possession represent only the first step in this direction. The nation that sets the precedent of unleashing these new forces of nature for purposes of destruction will have to deal with the responsibility of having opened the door to an era of devastation on an unimaginable scale. Unfortunately, President Truman did not read this letter until after the bomb had been dropped, and in the Oppenheimer movie, we see how he agrees to drop the bomb on Japan. Did he do the right thing? The narrative that is still being told on many sides is that Japan was unwilling to surrender, and that the bomb actually saved lives, since the human cost of invading Japan by traditional methods would have resulted in more deaths on both sides in the long run. However, it should be known that by 1945, the vast majority of Japanese cities had already been destroyed by the incendiary bombing set in motion by General Curtis LeMay, who at the end of the war said the following at a press conference. The war would have been over in 2 weeks without the Russians getting involved and without the atomic bomb. The atomic bomb had nothing to do with the end of the war at all. A year later, in 1946, the Strategic Bombing Study, which was conducted by the U.S. government, determined the following. Japan would have surrendered even if the atomic bombs had not been dropped. So the question is, why? Why unleash such destruction on a civilian population? Oppenheimer is presented in the film as a very careful person when it comes to giving statements and demonstrating his true intentions, so it is not clear whether he supported the dropping of the bomb as a matter of ego to satisfy his scientific curiosity, or whether he really believed it was a necessary action. However, his country's intentions were surely different. There are many reasons why the U.S. may have made the decision to drop the bomb, from justifying the massive expense of the Manhattan Project to wanting to intimidate other nations. But the fact is that dropping the bomb on a civilian population gave the U.S. the opportunity to study the long-term effects of its most powerful weapon. And this begs the question, is the technology dangerous? That is the central question that the Oppenheimer tape and in general Promethean figures like Oppenheimer himself or Frankenstein pose to us. These are cautionary tales that warn us that just because we can do something does not necessarily mean we should do it. In this sense, the philosopher Martin Heidegger also spoke on the subject, giving the example of the German Rhine River, which, he pointed out, was a natural source of wonder and inspiration. Over time, technology began to affect this river, first through the inclusion of small wooden bridges that did not counteract the natural beauty of the river, but seemed to permeate the natural landscape, and then through the implementation of hydroelectric dams, which broke the natural magic of the place. In essence, one of the great dangers of technology is the fact that we perceive nature as a potential resource to be exploited for our purposes. In this sense, we see the river as a means to generate energy. Forests are raw material. The fire that Prometheus gave us can be used to create as well as to destroy, in the same way as the atomic energy that Oppenheimer worked with. For Heidegger, then, the danger of technology is that it is not only a tool that can be used positively or negatively, but it is a way of thinking that dominates our existence, one in which we focus on efficiency, control over nature, and run the risk of losing our authentic essence as human beings and falling into alienation from the world. On July 16, 1945, the day Robert Oppenheimer and the Manhattan Project dropped the first atomic bomb, the world changed completely. But this moment, apparently unique in human history, is far from being so, since as long as we have the fire that Prometheus gave us with his sacrifice, we humans run the risk of repeating our mistakes over and over again, whether through the indiscriminate development of artificial intelligences, genetic experimentation, or a myriad of technologies whose ethics indisputably need to be questioned and monitored. Recently, a study revealed that 3/4 of the young population fears the future, and indeed they have reason to do so. It seems that we humans have not fully learned from the lessons of the past and events such as the Cold War, and we continue to develop technologies without thinking about how they will affect us in the long run. It is worth mentioning that this fatalistic sentiment is not something new, since in 1962, almost 2 decades after Robert Oppenheimer unleashed a rain of fire on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a French journalist asked him if he believed that humanity was digging its own grave through the creation of technologies such as the atomic bomb. To which he replied, "It is possible. I am not optimistic, but I remain hopeful."